Hey guys, it's Dave. Yesterday on Facebook, I saw a question that perfectly aligns with a little mini project I've been meaning to get to. Question was, is it time to uppot my propagate? I happen to have a plant in the exact same container with about the same number of roots showing. So perfect. I thought I'll bring you along for a short instructional video. I grabbed some other propagates. We'll look at those. I'll tell you which ones I will be uppotting and which ones I am going to wait on and why. Stick with me. By the way, hello, it's Dave. Happy almost Halloween. It's like 81 degrees here in Iowa at the end of October. I don't think it's supposed to be this warm, but I don't know. I'm always surprised at how warm the end of the year is for us until we get into true winter. I've got all my supplies ready. Got a couple plants I know you have not seen. I've got my usual substrate mix here that is linked in my description to my Amazon page. And let's start. Let's start with the onychoides. This is one you have not seen. This is a super, super cool plant. If you can find onychoides with this accession number, that's the one you're looking for. I'm getting sidetracked already. We just started this video. I bought this in this little cup here. And you can see, I think this is what, a 2-ounce cup? And you can see what roots there are there. And I will turn it around here for you. So not really seriously terribly rooted in there. And this is what was basically shown on Facebook. Now, I want to say just straight up, anybody who is offering assistance and help and suggestions, coming from that place of being helpful, I don't want to diminish the value of that ever. I think it is so important that we help each other. It won't surprise most of you who have been on the channel before that I didn't particularly agree with the answers. I don't think answers can usually be no or yes. Now, this plant is clearly very happy. It was presumably cut down here. It put off some wonky leaves. I took it over and it put out a really good leaf here, and then now it's really going. These are not even quite hardened off. It's not too rooted in here, and that was the majority of the comments were plenty of room for the roots to grow, which is true for me and it was true for her. But how are you going to keep this watered? Can you do it? This happens to be on a prop shelf in my plant porch. I walk by it 10 or 15 times a day. Pretty easy for me to do. If this were in a prop box, it would be very easy to do. But this is going to be in normal household temperatures and humidity over the winter. Furnace heat, it's going to dry out in no time at all. And as soon as I move it from a spot that I'm walking by, like I said, call it a dozen times a day, I will forget about this. Not entirely, but I will forget that it needs to be watered every other day. So my question, if I had posted anything on there, would have been, will you be able to keep up with watering? This plant is in much more danger of getting into trouble because of dry rot than me uppotting this now. The other downside of this is, now I've had this pinned to a power cord to the overhead lights in that shelf, is that it can't be properly trellised like this. And I suppose you could rig something up with an external trellis and have a cover pot and something I wouldn't ever do in a million years. I would just uppot this plant right now and get it on a proper trellis, because this is going to be one of the coolest Hoya in my entire collection. And it is killing me not to chop and prop this, but I'm going to grow it through next year into a magnificent plant, I am sure. And if I did repot this and trellised it, it'd probably look something like this. That looks really nice, and it's going to give it the support it needs to put out new growth, new leaves, size them up. The flowers on this get enormous. It's an incredible plant. I put it in a basalt clay pot, which is a big favorite of mine. Doesn't suck the moisture out of the cocoa coir and chips quite as quickly as normal terracotta does. Kind of moving towards that, in all the 6-inch pots now. But anyway, that looks fantastic. I have high hopes for this plant. I doubt it's going to let me down. Let's go to the opposite end of the spectrum to a definite no. I am not messing with this plant. I have a gorgeous clone of Hoya Jennifer. Many of you will know this is one of my all-time favorite plants. And as you can see, it's got 2 new leaves it's working on right there. One is much smaller than the other. We'll see if that one develops or not. And then of course it's got this vine that's coming out. This took a little while to get going. It's very thirsty, but to disturb it at this stage would be to kiss those 2 leaves goodbye. I'm 100% sure. I will put this either in a prop box where I don't have to think about this very much, or in the tent where I have to think about it more often, but not, you know, every 3 days like I am right now. If I put it in a prop box, I will use a seedling mat to encourage better growth, or just the natural warmth of the tent throughout the day with all the lights on in there. But this is definitely on the list of don't mess with it. I recommend you do the same if you have a plant that is finally putting off some really nice new growth down there. Try to leave it alone if you can. If those first 2 were very easy decisions, definite yes, definite no. No gray area. This next one, I could talk myself into going either way. This is not a plant you've seen on the channel before. This was a gift, like so many other dozens of Hoyas you've seen on my channel this year. This is the Globulosa Kaobang. This is formerly known as Villosa, so I'm sure you have seen it listed as Villosa. This I took off of this plant. It had a rather long internodal spacing, so I just went ahead and took this. It's one of those Hoya that in my collection actually has needed to settle in to its pot. So this has not been by any means a quick growing plant for me. It is well rooted in here and getting quite thirsty now. This is a plant, if you have not grown it, that I don't know how y'all do it with self-watering. I mean, I don't know how you grow Hoya in it. I know it can be done very, very well. But if you're growing it in a medium like I'm growing this in, you need to go dry. You need to be comfortable going dry, which is not my nature. I only have very few plants that I would let go quite as dry as a bone as this one. As this is drying out quite quickly, which I am comfortable with, but not putting out new growth, this might be a very good time to go ahead and repot this. I don't long-term grow in plastic, and I tend to run into more problems using it than not. Maybe more so in the tent where I tend to overwater because I'm not used to how long these can hold on to water. These are in normal household conditions, and they're going to remain that way. I think I'm going to repot these. I'm going to use a granite marble clay or basalt. Let me flip a coin. The decision has been made. I went with the granite marble. This particular pot sucks out even less water than basalt, and basalt sucks out less water than terracotta. So it's closer to a glazed ceramic pot. Closer. I mean, it's not like a glazed ceramic pot by any stretch, but a little bit closer, which means I put a very airy mix in here. So for me, any time I'm repotting something, that's the balance. The balance of what the plant needs, the balance of my environment, where am I going to be growing this for the foreseeable future. If it's going to be in the tent, it's going to be a different mix than if it's going to be in normal household conditions in front of a warm window, for instance. For this one, I understand these pots extremely well. I've been using these for years now. I know this plant, if it gets too wet, overwatered, it's going to drop leaves like crazy. How many leaves can I afford to spare? Not many. And I do not want to kill off a very generous gift like the Globulosa Kaobang. Next I'm going to show you, what are you? Natalie or Noelle? I'll put it on the screen, I can't remember right now. This is grown in perlite. I will grow in perlite if I have leaves that are very dehydrated for some reason. I quite honestly do not remember the circumstances of doing this, even though it hasn't been that long. I may have just been too tired to go downstairs and get substrate. I'm not sure. But anyway, this one's been rooted in perlite in normal household conditions. I'm grabbing this one because I see this question come up all the time. How many roots does the propagate need before you put it into its permanent substrate? Permanent substrate is my preference to start with, but I don't always do it. You don't need much. If the roots are activated, it's good to go. So let's take a look at this one. I kind of could, it won't show up on camera. I kind of could see through the plastic that it looked like it had kind of rooted. This right here is more than enough rootage. This right here, more than enough. So it comes up quite often that the roots need to have roots, and I've mentioned it a bunch on the channel. That's an aroid thing. That is not a Hoya thing. That's why I so prefer my normal soilless substrate. Just grow it in that. I don't have to worry about it until it's time to up pot, and I will judge that typically by how quickly it's getting thirsty, and I do not want to dry rot the Hoya. That's why when I up pot, I go to a size, I don't go to a size bigger, I go to a much bigger pot because I'm not going to continue to make incremental up pots. It just, to me, that doesn't make sense. And I know the information's out there that a Hoya has to settle into the pot before it'll grow. I've been over this 100 times. Baloney. Most Hoya, not every single one, most Hoya will do fine and start growing immediately. They don't need to feel constricted in their pot to do well. That said, I don't go buck wild with the sizing. With those little bitty roots, I would not put this in a 4-inch pot, or that marble clay pot, marble granite pot is 4.7 inches. But this is a 3-inch pot. I think it's like 2.7 at the opening, 3 inches tall. Perfect for this. It'll root in this, it'll look fantastic, it'll grow well, and it will find a home next year. Briefly, I'm going to show you another one in the gray area that I'm not going to up pot right now. This is a Calistophylla. This is species Kalimantan. This has been a long road to get to this point. It also is now very thirsty, but it was a struggle to grow this particular clone. I assume others are easier because its reputation is to be easy to grow. So before the battery died, I was saying I don't know how many times I had to restart this plant to get it to this point. It's happy. It's thirsty, but it's happy. And we have an active vine here, we've got one here, maybe another growth point starting. No, that was a figment of my imagination. As thirsty as it is, I would rather keep on top of this. I keep this kind of next to my love seat, so I see it all the time. It's with a bunch of other Hoya that I love. So it's not one I'm likely to sort of forget about, if that makes sense. You know, out of sight, out of mind. Of course that makes sense. So I'm gonna leave this one alone. It is going to need some support, and that's the downside of having this 3-inch container, because there's no great way to do it right now. I will put a couple pieces of really thin bamboo in. It's so incredibly slow growing that it will be fine until spring. Then I will repot it. I hope this was instructional, helpful. I think the short answer would have been, it's up to you. I don't think that would be very helpful to very many people, but hopefully I've given you some perspective on how I approach my propagates and you find it useful. Join me again in the next one real soon, okay? Bye-bye.